Now, what about our warfare? And in Genesis 3, we realize the dominant question in spiritual warfare is simply this: who will rule our hearts? Satan going to rule your heart, or is God going to rule your heart? See spiritual warfare for what it is. It is a battle for your heart. Who are you going to give your heart to? Whose voice are you going to listen to? Who will we trust and obey? Just let this soak in for a sec. The thought that I have chosen to let Satan rule my heart instead of God. That I have chosen to listen to his voice, Satan's voice, instead of God's. That in my sin, I have chosen to trust and obey Satan instead of God. See sin for the filth and the wickedness that it is. Don't trust him. Don't obey him. Don't listen to him. Don't let him rule your heart. This is the nature of our warfare. See the consequences of our defeat. The result of sin is temporal suffering. Both man and woman are cursed, banished from the garden. Temporal suffering. The penalty of sin is eternal death, blocked from the tree of life. Mark it down, brothers and sisters. Mark it down. Those who listen to the serpent's voice will feel the serpent's fangs. God, help us to feel the horror of Genesis 3. Now, there's a beautiful promise in the middle of it. So I don't want to leave it all with bad news. There's a beautiful promise in the middle of it that we're going to come back to. Deliverance is coming, God says. So that's the first text. Second text, 1 Samuel. Now I want you to note this. I think it's wrong in your book. 1 Samuel 16. 1 Samuel 16, verses 13 through 23. So turn over there. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verses 13 through 23. Trying to figure out how we can go through this without reading every single one of these passages. That one was familiar to you. This one is a little bit different. Listen to what happens. I'll read the beginning here. This happens right after Samuel is anointed. Samuel anoints David as soon coming king over Israel. And in contrast to the Spirit of the Lord on David, which is what verse 13 talks about, verse 14 talks about an evil spirit that begins to torment Saul. Listen to verse 14. Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. Saul's attendants said to him, "See, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord command his servants here to search for someone who can play the harp. He will play when the evil spirit from God comes upon you, and you will feel better." So Saul said to his attendants, "Find someone who plays well and bring him to me." One of the servants answered, "I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the harp. He is a brave man and a warrior. He speaks well and is a fine-looking man, and the Lord is with him." Then Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, "Send me your son David, who is with the sheep." So Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread, a skin of wine, and a young goat, and sent them with his son David to Saul. David came to Saul and entered his service. Saul liked him very much, and David became one of his armor bearers. Saul sent word to Jesse, saying, "Allow David to remain in my service, for I am pleased with him." Whenever the Spirit from God came upon Saul, David would take his harp and play. Then relief would come to Saul, he would feel better, and the evil spirit, would leave him. Now we got to be careful not to jump to all kinds of fanciful conclusions here, okay? Well, if you play some good music, demons will flee. So all right, let's look at this text and its context. Now this is interesting. Circle this. 4 different times the Bible talks about an evil spirit from the Lord or from God. Verse 14, an evil spirit from the Lord. Verse 15, an evil spirit from God. Verse 16, you might circle it here. Evil spirit from God. And then in verse 23, the spirit from God. Now what's that about? An evil spirit from God. And the picture is a demon, an evil spirit who received permission from God to torment Saul. And this is the point of the story. Why would God allow an evil spirit to torment Saul? First, because God was judging Saul. God is sending a tormentor, and this is a direct result of Saul's sin. If you go back to 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 23, Samuel talked about it in reference to Saul's rebellion. His rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. Saul, 1 Samuel 15, 23, had rejected God. So the picture is, in 1 Samuel 16, God is judging Saul, and at the same time, God was exalting David as the coming king and allowing David to bless Saul with peace. And so here's two important principles that we need to take away from this picture. First, the powers of evil are inferior to God. Again, we see this. Evil spirits are acting only within the divine permission of God. They are subordinate to God. And the spirit tormenting Saul is a consequence of his own sin. This is a story about the punishment of sin in Saul's life. The demon's not making Saul sin here. The demon is a consequence of his sin.